Recording now. And then... Okay, you should be good to go.
Emotional Disturbance by Cheyenne Miller, Sierra Jones, Elizabeth Myers, and Emily Cockrow for SPED 802 at Fort Hays State University. During this presentation, we will examine students diagnosed with emotional disturbance, or ED. We will examine characteristics of the diagnosis, a placement of students in appropriate educational setting, instructional strategies to support the students, both emotional and behavioral disorders, the social impact with students, and appropriate social skills and coping strategies, and strategies to work with families to develop appropriate communication and appropriate planning for student resources. The exceptionality. The legal definition of emotional disturbance is a condition exhibiting one or more of the following characteristics over a long period of time, and to a marked degree that adversely affects a child's educational performance. So we're really looking at the inability to learn that cannot be explained by intellectual, sensory, or health factor. We also want to look at a student's inability to build or maintain any type of interpersonal relationship with peers and teachers. They have inappropriate types of behaviors or feelings that would be considered under normal circumstances, and a general pervasive mood of unhappiness and depression. They also tend to show or develop physical symptoms or fears associated with personal or school problems. The etiology of this exceptionality. There is no one specific cause to ED, but instead goes along with several factors, including biological makeup, home life, and school life. For the biological makeup, it could be anything of students exposed to drugs, brain damage, hereditary factors, or malnourishment. Their home life would have to deal with inconsistent rules, lack of resources, physical abuse, lack of interest from parent to child. And their school life, again, there are rules that are inconsistent, an inappropriate classroom management, or inappropriate dialogue between the teacher and student. Some common characteristics that are associated with ED would include hyperactivity, so short attention span or impulsiveness, an aggression or self-injurious behavior, acting out or fighting, a withdrawal, so not interacting socially with others, excessive fear or anxiety, an immaturity, inappropriate crying, temper tantrums, or poor coping skills that will go along with appropriate socialization, and learning difficulties, so academically performing below grade level.
So the next section is placement, how to determine whether a student qualifies under EBD. So to determine if a student is identified as having EBD, the process that is used to evaluate is called the non-discriminatory evaluation process. So I've kind of outlined how this process works. First, you go through observations. So these are observations from the teachers, parents, and other adults that are consistently with the student. Some things that those people might see is aggressive behaviors, unhappiness or depression. A student might act withdrawn during classroom activities, and behaviors may occur in more than one setting. The next section is screening. So the three screening processes are, they'll look at classroom work products. So this is the work that a student completes during class time, and they're looking to see if they have trouble staying on task or following rules. The next one is the group intelligence test. So they usually score low, average to slow learner range, and their performance may not be accurate or the performance may not accurately reflect their ability. The next one is group achievement test. The group achievement test, the student usually performs lower than expected. This can be due to the student's behaviors during the test. And then the last one is they look at their vision and hearing. There's usually no correlation with this. The third step is the pre-referral. The teacher will implement any suggestions from the school-based team into the general education classroom. After the pre-referral, if those things do not work, they'll do the actual referral to look at the interventions that were not successful. Then they go into the fifth step, which is the non-discriminatory evaluation procedures and standards. So you'll start with the individualized intelligence test, the scale for assessing emotional disturbance. This is on the next slide. The individualized achievement test, the behavior rating scale, and the assessment for strengths. The assessment measures of social skills, self-esteem, personality, and/or adjustments. Any anecdotal records that have been taken on the student throughout the school year. For these records, it can't just be based off of a short period of time. It has to be an extended amount of time. They'll look at curriculum-based assessments and any direct observations that are done by adults. And then the sixth step is the determination. This is the final step. They determine whether or not the student has EBD and needs for special education or any related services. So to kind of go into depth, the scale for assessing ED includes 45 items, and adults are filling out those forms. They rate between a 0 and a 3. 3 meaning they have severe problems in a certain area, and then a 0, they have no problems in the area. It looks at 5 different subscales that align with elements from IDEA, which are the inability to learn, inability to build or maintain satisfactory relationships, inappropriate behaviors, unhappiness or depression, and physical symptoms or fears. This scale helps to identify any student diagnosis. It helps to determine what goals that you'll put into an IEP, and then any relevant behavioral information. And then the next rating scale that they look at is the behavioral and emotional rating scale. This scale includes 53 different items, and those filling out the form rate on a 4-point scale. So 4 being very much like the child and the 0 being not like the child at all. Teachers, parents, and other adults who know the child can complete this assessment, and it has to be collected from 3 different perspectives. So they have 3 different tests: the youth rating scales, that's done by the child, the teacher rating scale, that's done by the teacher, and then the parent rating scale, done by the parents. It assesses the strengths in 5 different areas: interpersonal capacity, family involvement, interpersonal competence, school functioning, and effective ability. And so that's kind of the overview of placement. And so then we get into the evidence-based strategies that are used with kiddos who have EBD. One of the biggest ones is mindfulness. They teach the student mindfulness. When teachers and students are fully attuned to each moment, they feel grounded and centered with open minds and open hearts. They experience a state of calmness that enables them to pay careful attention as they regulate their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Some benefits of this are those who experience a range of pain or challenges and those who want to enhance their overall wellness. So the mindfulness education program follows 5 types of mindful literacy. It follows physical literacy, which is to slow down, be present, and focus on having a safe body. The mental literacy means to avoid distractions and to direct your attention onto one specific point of focus. Emotional literacy, acknowledge your negative and positive emotions. Social literacy, turn your attention towards others and develop empathy and compassion for others. And then the last one is global literacy, which is being aware of your own actions and how they affect others, and it moves beyond your immediate circle. And then a couple more evidence-based strategies. One used for younger students is the Incredible Years program. It's used with kids 3 to 8 years of age. The focus is key skills of self-control and problem solving, play skills, academic success, and self-esteem. And then it is focused on being highly culturally sensitive. They have 3 different trainings. They have the child training, which they call it the Child Dinosaur Social, Emotional, and Problem-Solving Curriculum. They have the parent program, which focuses on positive discipline, nurturing relationships with their child, anger management, and partnerships with the educators. And then they have the teacher program, which focuses on classroom management skills, partnerships with families, instruction and problem solving, and the enjoyments of teaching. Included in this program are short-term and long-term goals. Some short-term goals are they increase school readiness and emotional regulation, improve parent interactions and relationships, improve teaching relationships with students and parents. And then some long-term goals are they reduce youth school dropouts, increase academic achievement, reduce youth conduct disorders and criminal activity, and reduce your drug and alcohol problems. And then a evidence-based strategy used for middle school and high school is the DBT skills training for emotional problem solving for adolescents. This is used with students who are in middle and high school. It's designed to enhance emotional problem solving, focuses on acceptance and change and flexible thinking. So you're going to have acceptance of a current emotional and behavioral challenges, and then change in terms of learning new skills to resolve those challenges. This curriculum addresses 4 key emotional challenges. They are difficulty managing emotions, confusions about self, distractions, impulsiveness, and interpersonal problems. The curriculum includes 4 different modules, which is mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness.
Students with EBD tend to have difficulty developing certain social skills, including controlling their emotions, which often results in outbursts of various kinds, peaceful interpersonal problem solving like active listening, reciprocal communication, or even ignoring, which is something we probably take for granted. We can tune out those extra random things that are happening around us and just get on with what we're supposed to be doing, but that's something that they could have a hard time learning to do. They have difficulty sometimes learning pro-social behaviors like sharing, helping others, cooperating with people. And they struggle a lot with self-management strategies like organization and time management. Because students with EBD, we're on the next slide, the curricula that works well for them. Because students with EBD have a harder time picking up on social skills, they benefit from direct instruction on the subject. Using social skills training, teachers work with students with EBD to introduce needed skills, fine-tuning their use, guide their students in utilizing the skills, and applying them in various settings and situations. Along with teaching healthy behaviors, SST also includes reducing or even completely removing problem behaviors. SST can benefit all students, and when taught in multicultural or diverse classrooms, everyone can benefit. Having peers instruct one another is highly effective, as teaching is one of the best ways to solidify learning. Through self-mediated learning, students apply certain social skills like time management to the process of learning other skills. The traditional model of teachers leading instruction is also beneficial. As well as the biological makeup and home life as described in the etiology of EBD earlier in this presentation, families of students with EBD are more likely to live in poverty, have a head of household with no formal education past high school, and live in a single parent household. These are some issues that make it challenging for students with EBD in school. And some challenges presented by cultural differences include recognizing the difference between culturally different behaviors and behaviors exhibited by students with EBD. Sometimes what some cultures see as appropriate behavior, the teachers in the classroom think is totally inappropriate. And it's important for us to recognize what's really going on there. It's also important to recognize that when students with limited English proficiency might be acting out because they are not understood or cannot express themselves clearly, that does not necessarily mean they have EBD, but rather they just need to work on their English skills.
strategies for working with students and families with EBD is to include the parents in the children's educational planning and implementation, making sure that they're a part of meetings, phone calls, and emails. Also, training offered to families in order to extend SST and other practices into homes can be beneficial. It is also culturally important to provide appropriate assistance to culturally diverse students with EBD, including unbiased assessments, as well as hire culturally diverse educators, train all educators in multicultural practices and awareness, and create a multiculturally respectful atmosphere. Some ways to be culturally responsive are to be aware of your own triggers and things that you get upset with, as well as with your students. Pay attention to the things that they say, the clothing that they wear, and the way that their family interacts with each other, because it may not be the same as it is in your household. So it's important to be aware of those things. It is also important to be aware of the things that trigger your students and encourage them to start to escalate or start to react in a way that may not be appropriate in the classroom. Another thing that is important is to be respectful of your students' boundaries. If a student says that they don't like hugs, they don't like high fives, they don't like fist bumps, then you need to respect that and not do as they ask, because if that is a trigger for them, it could send them into a whole different escalation cycle that you had no idea would happen. It's also important to give students lots of praise whenever they're diagnosed with EBD. Don't tell them what they don't do wrong, tell them what they do right. Also listen if they're upset and let them know that they're heard. Don't engage in arguments. Let them know that I understand that you're upset, and let them know that you're here to talk and compromise. I always think this quote is something that we should keep in mind when working with students with EBD. They aren't giving me a hard time, they're having a hard time. So know the factors that could be causing your students' EBD, whether it be home, school life, and then work to target that specific behavior. Exhaust all your resources and use several interventions. One intervention is not going to fix everything because often behavioral disorders are very complex. And remain calm when you're working with a student. Do not engage in arguments or power struggles. Promote social skills with students. Teach them how to interact with people. Don't just yell at them for the way that they do it. And then monitor progress often and provide lots of positive feedback.